Hi, y'all. My name is Marshall Wilson. This is Taproot. My buddy Todd is unavailable right now, which is a real shame because I know y'all prefer to hear him talk than me. I know I get tired of hearing myself talk. Um, I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank you for listening. Todd is setting up methods for you to get a hold of us, including on X. We have an account for Taproot, Marshalling Freedom. But sure would love to hear from y'all. Want to get some feedback. Let me know when you think I'm saying something stupid. Let me know when you think that we're saying something smart. Argue with us. I actually thrive on arguing. If you don't believe me, you can ask my wife, and the captain will tell you that I actually thrive on arguing. Meanwhile, with your permission, I'd like to ask you to keep our friend our friend Paul in your prayers. He was injured and is not doing well as far as I can tell. And I believe that the fervent prayers of a righteous man avail much. So if y'all out there would please keep Paul in your prayers, I'd be grateful. Anyway, so lately I've had the opportunity to be involved in a lot of discussions on the border. Now, this is interesting to me because, I live in West Virginia, and most people presume that West Virginia, we're not too interested in the border. We've got our own things going on, and we're so far from the borders that it's not an issue, and that's simply not true. First of all, we are the heart of America. We are Americans, even when most of America is not, and I hope you'll forgive me for that, but it's a fact. West Virginians are down-home Americans. We are, for the most part, Mayberry. That's why I love it here. I did not grow up in West Virginia, but I came here when I came home from Iraq, and I married a great lady who said she'd put up with me, but only if I moved to West Virginia with her. So here we are, and we love it here. We choose to live here because of what West Virginia is. It's a beautiful place. The people are good in general. The government is completely whacked out of its mind. Bananas, but other than that, it's a great place to be. And and the border does affect us. The failures at the borders and all points of entry. And I want to be clear about this. I hope y'all understand. It's not just the southern border. The southern border is the most dramatic issue, but points of entry. The ports, the airports, the seaports, and then also the northern border. I don't know if y'all are aware of this, but apparently Canada gives out passports, Canadian passports, to people who've never been there. And because we as a nation trust them as a nation, we have allowed them to, we maintain this open border with them. Don't get me wrong, there are checkpoints, but it's pretty liberal passage, and we don't really guard the border as well as we could, because Canada's our ally. They're a well-organized Western nation, and we should be able to trust them to figure out who they're going to let into their country, and anyone that they accept, we probably should be able to accept, except that that's not true. And that's become graphically true recently, as we've discovered that there are people with Canadian passports who've never set foot in Canada and might be entering the United States with Canadian passports, and we don't know who the heck they are. So most people, I think, and probably most people who listen to GCD Network or watch GCD Network, understand why it's so important to maintain physical security of our border, and probably are not sitting there looking at me saying, well, you're just a racist and you don't want foreigners in our country. Most people, I think, would understand that who watch GCD, but I could be mistaken. And the thing is that a lot of people in the United States of America are incapable or refuse to see the fact that this is our home. And these same people will lock their homes when they leave, or lock their homes at night because they don't want people that they haven't invited into their homes to enter their homes. And yet they expect us to leave our borders wide open and just let whoever wants to to stumble through. And it's kind of fascinating to me that the people I've heard make these arguments are either hardcore dyed-in-the-wool leftists who are globalists and want the United States of America to fall, or they're even these ANCAP friends of mine, anarchists. They don't want government in anything that it's not supposed to be in. As a matter of fact, they'd really like for government to go away. And frankly, I find myself leaning that direction very hard. Leaning that way very hard. The thing is, though, that I realize that we're all corrupt. We're all corrupt, and we need a system to prevent us from depriving each other of the free exercise of our rights. Of course, the problem is that system, government, is made of a bunch of other people who are corrupt. And so we've got to have all these checks and balances when what we should be able to have is just all of us, leaving each other alone and living our own lives. But, there will always be an element in our society who refuses to do that. And quite frankly, there was a point in my life where I really thought it was my job to go out and teach other people how to do better. In other words, teach them to live the way that I thought they should live. And I was in the Army, and I had the opportunity to exercise that desire with the soldiers I was training, and then also once I finally deployed on the battlefield, I saw what it means when you actually attempt to exercise that desire on a national level. And I brought those lessons home and engaged in politics here. So what I'm getting at is I really lean hard toward government being kept out of everything that it can be. And I also believe that there are certain things the government must do, and it must excel at doing these things. One is defending the border, securing the border, making sure that we know who is coming into our home. Now, I know for a fact that the federal government has been flying people into West Virginia in the middle of the night, dropping them off. We don't know who they are. And we're supposed to just believe that the federal government has vetted them and knows who they are and that they're good. Well, the problem with that is we know they're not doing that. In addition to that, the best information that I have says that over the past 4 years, 20 million people have entered this country illegally. A great number, in addition to that, a bunch have been caught and then released back into the country. And a large number of those are, I say a large number, it's a few hundred, but that's a lot from my perspective, people who were on the terrorist watch list. We know that they're involved in terrorism, or we have good reason to believe that they are. And yet our federal government simply let them go into your backyard, wherever that is. I also, when I ran for governor here in West Virginia this past year in 2024, one of the things I did was I spent time talking with police chiefs and sheriffs around the state because, maintaining the rights of citizens is a basic function of government, and our policing agencies, if they're doing their jobs, do that very well. They work hard to do it. Unfortunately, in most cases, I think they kind of lost not specifically in West Virginia, but in general across the nation, and especially with the federal policing agencies, they've lost the vision. They've lost their strategic vision, and they think that their job is something very different from what it should be. But in one little tiny town with a police force of 3 officers, including the chief, a little tiny town, backwoods West Virginia, 3 police officers, and they have a very active gang of criminal aliens who have moved into West Virginia and taken up shop. And, their crime went from, kind of Mayberry style. And, you got a guy who's bumbling around drunk and they got to get him off the street so he didn't get hurt, to this, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it went from that to basically they've got this gang that's larger than the police department, and in a lot of cases better equipped than the police department, basically running this little town. So yes, the border issue is a problem for us here in the heart of America. far, far away from the borders and the ports of entry. So I was invited back in, I believe it was February of this year, to go to Washington, D.C., and to speak at the Institute of World Politics along with three other speakers, each of whom had more direct experience with the border. One was a former I think he was with Customs and Border Protection, but anyway, former director of that agency. Another was a retired immigration judge, and another, I can't remember his specific title, but was another man who was very much involved in that, in immigration and the problems on the border. My job was to speak from my perspective how those problems affected the average family living as far away from the border basically as you could be, any of the borders as you could be. And I realized that Kansas is probably farther from most borders than West Virginia, but we're not border states. We're out in the middle of the country. And so I had this great opportunity, and we talked and learned a great deal about why things are the way they are. I'm not happy about it. I don't think anybody should be, but more importantly, I learned that it was not just incompetence. It was not just what I've always been told, which is there are just other priorities that are higher. There are other priorities that are more pressing, things that require the money, the effort, the capabilities, and all that kind of stuff. Well, it's not true. I was an infantry officer in the Army, and job one is always physical security, always. Because if you get dead, you can't do any of the other priorities. If you are dissolved as a nation because you can't protect yourself because you're overrun, you can't do anything else. It has to be the highest priority. Now, there are a lot of important things that we as a nation should do. There's a very small number of very important things that the United States government should do, and those things also are not happening. But those are the excuses that they will use for why they won't control the border. Fortunately, I believe we've elected a president who has that as a very high priority. And one demonstration of that is that he chose Tom Homan to be his border czar. I am not a big fan of living in a constitutional republic and having people who carry the title czar. A czar actually is a Russian word that goes back to Caesar, Kaiser, from Rome, and of course you can understand why that kind of makes my palms itch to think about that. But if they want to say he is, he's a problem solver, he's the guy who's handling this issue, he's the president's direct representative in the milieu surrounding that issue, I'm good with that. I just wish they wouldn't use the word czar. But I have read a lot of Mr. Homan's work and watched videos and seen what he's been involved in. And he's got a website for his organization. It's called Border 911. Makes a lot of sense on a lot of different levels, but Border 911, if you want to check it out. And he's also got some classes on there. I haven't had a chance to engage in the classes, although I would like to basically teach you how these different organizations are supposed to work together. And, customs, border protection, immigration, USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, all these different entities that are supposed to have control of a portion of border control. And it's a mess. It is a mess. And Mr. Homan understands how all these things are supposed to work together, and he seems to have a very solid strategic vision. His strategic goals for how to fix this problem make a lot of sense. And I've seen a little bit of what seems to be a strategic plan to reach those goals. But man, I would love to actually have the chance to talk with him and see what he has to say about some, as an operational planner in the Army, I'd like to understand, the actual physical operation that's going to take place to fix these problems. But I have some hope. That hope is profoundly mitigated by the fact, that's not it. I have another book here that I've just just finished reading, just purchased it the other day. It's called Al-Qaeda 2.0. Al-Qaeda 2.0. And I cannot believe I set that aside. I must have carried it off into the living room to read it some more. But anyway, Al-Qaeda 2.0 is published by a group of intel officers from all Five Eyes. I hope you know what that means. But anyway, folks who couldn't get satisfaction on the intel they were providing through their own national system, through their own intel agencies, through their own governments, through their own military. And so they basically published this as an intel report to you and me. And it names the key actors. It explains exactly what they're doing, but there is they're talking about making the Intifada international, which they have done. And the idea is to infiltrate the United States and get enough of their people inside so that we cannot possibly fight back against them. Now, they have really stepped up their operations because it became apparent that Mr. Trump was going to win the election. But over the past 4 years, they've had a free hand to do whatever they wanted. And even before that, they weren't really limited the way they should have been. So what we have here, and I hope that you'll stick with me on this, we have hardened, trained fighters who are also operational planners, who are commanders within the Intifada. You know, they're with Al-Qaeda and the associated organizations and everything. So basically, Osama bin Laden formed this organization, Al-Qaeda, with some people that he trained and trusted. And they had a central command, which was basically centered around him, of course. And then the U.S., well, the allies, went in and destroyed his central command, including him. But by the time we did that, he had already trained his subordinate leaders so that they can go out and plan and execute their own operations without direct guidance from him. Now, they coordinate with each other. They try to. And, you know, if they're able to, then they coordinate everything. But they're very good at this. And so you've got those guys coming from hot war zones who have been conducting these sorts of operations, and they have come into the United States. In addition to that, you have a vast number of dissatisfied, disaffected people from various ugly parts of the world, including, you know, South and Central America. And by the way, I'm not saying that the people who live in those parts of the world are necessarily ugly. Some of you folks know that I lived for quite a while in the Amazon jungle in Peru, and then I had 2 kids that I adopted down there. So I'm not talking about individual. I'm talking about individual people, not entire people groups. As a matter of fact, I rarely talk about entire people groups because I believe that each one of us is individually responsible for his own actions. But so you've got a bunch of these folks who are disaffected. They're not engaged. They're not part of what's going on in the United States. They have their own subculture. They are underground, and they are frustrated that they aren't getting what they want. Okay. And then, in addition to that, now this is the really critical part because, you know, as an infantry officer, I know that you can have a bunch of really highly motivated, capable, intelligent, well-trained, and well-equipped soldiers go out and do a lot of great things, but they can only get so far without resources, coordination, and information from higher up. That's just the way it works. But you can also have a bunch of genius officers, like of course I was. I'm joking. You can have the smartest officers in the world coming up with the best ideas in the world, which, you know, most of them are actually kind of half-baked anyway, from what I've experienced. But if they were the best group of officers in the world, they can't execute. They can't do the mission. They can't. You know, it's a small group of people, and they are not the guys on the ground making it happen. So what you have to have between the planners, you know, the commanders and the planners and all that kind of stuff, and the executors, is you have to have people who are providing structure to the organization, who are directing operations and tactics on the ground. And it might amaze you, I'm embarrassed to say that it amazed me when I first discovered this. And then, of course, my immediate thought was, why does that surprise me? It shouldn't. But the drug cartels from South and Central America are providing the logistics and the rat lines and the combo and the coordination between the dedicated terroristic killers who have this vision of what they want to turn America into. And it's not something you or I would like. And they are willing to do whatever it takes, give their own lives, take your life, destroy your family, do awful things to your children. All right. They are prepared to do any of it, whatever it takes. And they are teaching other people to see the world the way they do. So meanwhile, you've got the cartels, the drug cartels, who of course have these massive networks that they have built inside the United States and have had them for decades, for generations. And these things are already in place. So you have people living in the United States who are just walking around. Nobody knows who they are, but they are looking for a purpose. And then you have these people who have a purpose and are looking for people to execute that purpose in the United States. And then you have these brokers, these subordinate leaders, these guys who already have a system in place and are just looking for an opportunity to create chaos in the United States, and have been doing so for a long time. And they are in place, ready to go. Beyond all that, you have to understand that there are people who have been in the United States for decades, who already, they are some of the guys that I was talking about infiltrating through the borders, specifically the southern border. But there are a bunch of those guys who've been in place for a long time. They're just sleepers. Dearborn, Michigan, the places where you have this large Muslim influence, you're going to have these guys hanging out. DC, they're there, and they are ready to rock and roll. Now, I believe that Mr. Trump understands that situation based on things he's said, things he's done. I think he has deep appreciation for that. I think Mr. Homan really gets it. And some of the people I've met who know him, they also seem to have a very clear vision of what's going on here and what needs to be done. The problem is that the operation that is planned and for which they have prepared, and which the Al-Qaeda has set up, is already in motion. And we got another, almost 2 weeks before Mr. Trump takes over. And then, of course, what he's got to do is he's got to build his teams, build his operators and his leaders. He has to have his, for lack of a better word, his senior commanders, his strategic planners, his operational planners and commanders all the way down. But these guys are already in place. And there is every reason to believe that they will kick something off soon. If not between now and the inauguration, which seems very, very likely, then in the period of chaos during the turnover in personnel, so the changing of the guard. As the Biden administration moves out, the Trump administration moves in. And by all accounts, it looks like the Trump administration is going to be removing a lot of people who are in positions within the federal government right now, which over time is a good thing, which, from a strategic perspective will ultimately be a good thing, but immediately it's going to be chaos. So what do we need to do? You and I, first of all, what the government needs to do is they need to shut the borders and the points of entry and until we have positive control of it. Depending on the response of the American people to that action, it could become more complicated. And by American people, keep in mind, I'm also talking about recent immigrants. And then, of course, there are a lot of people who are not legal immigrants who are in our country. And There are all sorts of things they're capable. So if you imagine Troy and the Trojan horse, well, we've got tens of thousands of Trojan horses that have come in, each one of which dumped out a bunch of soldiers. And then also we've had, the enemy leaders are actually inside our perimeter. They're actually in our command post. If you add to that the fact, like I said, they're in our command post, you add to that the fact that the existing government, the current administration, is working against us, against we the people, against our rights, against the security that we expect from our government, that we demand from them. Or actually, we have not demanded it, which is the problem. We should have. We're in bad shape, folks. So, first of all, as I say, we need to shut down the borders, period. And look, I want to explain that I have something to lose from this. This is not just, some gringo sitting here saying, don't let anybody come in. First of all, there is precedent. It has been done before. Secondly, it is necessary because this is a security operation. And, we have failed. We are in the position now that there are bad guys who mean us harm, who are capable of causing great harm, who are already inside our perimeter. Well, having run security operations in a combat zone, I will tell you that if there had been an attack inside one of the posts that I was responsible for securing, the first thing I would do is shut down the perimeter. I wouldn't let anybody through. I don't care if it's a 3-star general and he's got all of his flunkies with him and he's got ABC News with him and whatever else. We shut the post. And I have friends in other countries. I have, I've got 2 kids from Peru. Frankly, right now, the lady who took care of them for me for a long time while I was trying to get permission to bring them to the United States, she's here right now visiting. She came for Christmas and has stayed a while, and I'm very happy to have her here. She does not intend to immigrate, to move to the United States. She's here legally. She went through all the right steps. And, I'm kind of hoping that her son, who's one of my best friends, will be able to come too. He's a great guy, but he's applied for his visa and he's trying to get here. But given the fact that I have not seen him in years, that he went through some of the hardest times in my life with me, that I love him like a brother, I am willing to shut the border in his face to keep the bad guys from being able to dismantle our country. Because frankly, if we don't do what is necessary, no matter how hard it is, we will not have a country for my friend to come to. I hope that's clear to everybody. Now, having said that, keep in mind the fact that I am very much a government minimalist, but that is a hard and fast duty of our federal government to protect the borders and points of entry. And I do have this profound concern that once we've completed this operation, we'll be in a position where the government will have more power than I want it to have. Now, this is always an issue. It's always a concern. This isn't new. This doesn't come to light with the Trump administration. This has always since the beginning of human history, been a problem with governments. When there's a tough time, the government is the only one who can do the job, and it's less often than they tell you it is, by the way. But it is their job to secure the border. They have to take extravagant actions to do the job because they have failed for so long. Now they're finally going to have to take extravagant actions. What you've actually done is you put them in a position where we've allowed them to take center stage, right? We will allow the federal government to take center stage in this critical issue of closing the border. And then, of course, reorganizing the structure of the border. And I mean, all of the agencies, everybody who deals with that, not the physical spot on the ground only, that also. The processes, the organizations, the physical borders, the physical ports of entry. But once we have done that successfully, we have to have people involved in that process who will then say, okay, this is established the way it's supposed to be. We need to reopen the border and let it run the way it's supposed to so that we know who's coming in, we know where they're going, we know when they intend to leave, we have an idea what their background is and what their intent is. And, we know we are expecting them to depart by a certain date, and we're watching for that. And if they don't, we're going to get them. Right? Once we've established all of that, then we need people who will actually say, okay, the federal government now has a system in place. It's actually doing its job. And we need to step off the center of the stage, and this just becomes another function that we're doing. It should be transparent. It should be in the background. It should run like a machine, and we got some technicians in there making sure it runs appropriately. But right now we've got to dismantle and rebuild the machine, and the only way we can do that is to close the border. It doesn't make any sense any other way. And yet, once that's done, we have to ensure that we have not deprived American citizens of the free exercise of their rights, and that we do not build a system that incarcerates Americans in America. Now, I don't believe that's Mr. Trump's intent. I know it's not Mr. Holman's intent. But the thing is, all men are corrupt, and there are people who will be a part of this system who will enjoy the power, who will enjoy the acknowledgement that they get, who will enjoy the kick that they get because they're doing things and they're doing them to people. And we need to have people in positions of authority and responsibility within that system who will say, stop. We're doing the job we're supposed to do. We're not going to have any mission creep. We're not going to take on new responsibilities, new authorities. We're going to do our job, and we're going to leave people alone once we're doing our job. So the job of government is to secure the natural rights of the people, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Securing the border is a critical part of that job. It's got to be done. But once that job is done by the relevant agencies, that's it. That's what they do. They don't need to take on new authorities, new responsibilities. They don't need to creep into any other areas of anything else. They need to do what they are there to do. Secure your rights by securing the border. Secure our rights by securing the border. So it's critical that we have leadership in those positions who understand that. And of course, this is a huge monster. The federal government is just massive. And I understand with Doge coming in and Mr. Musk, and I believe that everyone that the president is bringing on board kind of has that vision to tighten the government down, to save money, to stop taxing so much, to diminish the federal government. I sincerely believe that is the intent. But I have seen good men. I have seen honest and decent and respectable people go into government with all the best intent and then fall in love with being in the government. And once their identity becomes a part, or the job they're supposed to do for the government becomes such a part of their identity that it's a personal affront to them when someone says, that's not really your business. That's your agency doesn't do that. I've seen it various times, various places, and it's just a human reaction. We're all corrupt, all of us, and I'm not saying that, I'm not naming a particular person who's going to be a problem. I'm saying that it's inherent in each of us to want to have a larger mission, to build our own little kingdom, to have more power, to have more authority, to have more acknowledgement, more recognition, maybe a bigger paycheck too. But what we need is men and women. I hope you understand, when I use the term men, I'm referring to the creature, people. We need men who will sacrifice to accomplish the mission, and then sacrifice to prevent becoming a problem. do the job, and then say thank you for the opportunity, and then move on. It's the way government service was supposed to be in the beginning. Woodrow Wilson and his ilk got involved in the quote science of administration, and they built a cadre of experts. And then, of course, what they do is they build a need for the experts. And what we really need is just people who are going to secure our natural rights and then go home. Not bother us anymore. That's the idea. So what do we do? I just kind of outlined very sketchily what I think needs to happen in the federal government and why. And I really wish we could have some interaction here, because I'd like to know what you're thinking and what you'd like to hear from me, and ideas that you want to throw at me. But in addition to that, what do we as citizens do? What do we as citizens do? Well, frankly, were it up to me, were I in a position to do so, I would actually prepare the citizenry as a militia, because I believe this is going to become necessary. So there's a couple of things going on here. I described what I project the enemy is going to do, right? Based on my analysis, based on analyses that I've read from other people, I believe that they intend to attack us from within, and that they have the people in place to do that. When they do that, if we respond with military presence on U.S. soil, that sets us up for the military to become the government throughout the United States, and that is bad news. That is bad news. If you look at human history, all throughout human history, there have been situations where the military took an emergency position and then they became the government. God help us. I used to work in emergency operations, civil military operations, and it was always really critical that we ensure that everyone understood that while the military components of the civil military operation were usually far better organized, had a more solid command structure. All right, they had unity of command. When the boss said do something, everybody said yes, sir. You don't have that in a civilian sector. In a civil authority, such as the police, fire department, they're probably the best, but the rest of the civil government doesn't have that centralized authority, and that's a good thing. That's one of the things that protects our liberties. So when a military component exists within an operation like that, they always gravitate to the lead position, and it needs to be the exact opposite. They need to back off. And I, as a civil military operations planner, had to build that into all of my plans, where I literally said, we will have this much power for this long to make sure that these goals are met, that these strategic tasks are accomplished. And the moment that we can withdraw from controlling anything, we supported all sorts of things. Our job was to support the civil authorities. We supported everything we could, but everything that we were in charge of, we had to release back to the civil authorities the moment they were capable of handling it. And I believe that this border restructuring has to take that same effect. Basically, the idea is that we, the people, have to keep an eye on it and make sure that that's happening, that our government is exercising exactly the authority that it needs to accomplish the job, and then is releasing that. The military, the more structured, formal leadership roles are being handed back to civilians just as rapidly as we can. One way to make sure that happens is to not give the military a lead role in the beginning. You may say, well, if we're invaded, then we need to have the military involved. The militia exists to repel invasions. The military should be on the border. The militia, we the people, should be inside doing the work of defending our families and homes. And we've only got 15 minutes or so left. And that would probably be a whole new show, the military as compared to the militia and that sort of thing. And a lot of people think the National Guard is the militia. As a matter of fact, the federal government claims that they are, but that is not a fact. The militia is the citizens. And, I spent a lot of time working with the Guard and building, like I said, civil military operations, bringing the Guard in to support people when there are terrorist attacks or tornadoes or whatever else. The fact of the matter is, that we, the people, are the militia. And it's our job to defend our homes and our communities. All right. That's actually what the Second Amendment's all about. Now, defending them from whomever we need to defend them from. That's the idea. Now, of course, with the National Guard, they say, well, that's the state militia. Well, yeah, but the moment somebody said the president or someone working for him signs a piece of paper that says they've been federalized, they're not your hometown boys anymore. They now work for the president. They work for the U.S. federal government. So they are federal troops. I hope y'all understand that. I'm not saying your hometown boys are bad people. They're some of the finest people I've ever known, National Guardsmen. Kind of people who care about their homes and will do whatever it takes to take care of them. The problem is they now belong to someone else. Now, what they choose to do about that is between them and God, I suppose. But the point is, it's the militia. It's we the people standing up and protecting our families. That's point number one. Be prepared to do that. Point number two is, or that's point number two. Point number one was, keep your eye on the government, make sure they're actually doing only what they need to do to get the job done, and then they're handing the authorities back to the civil authorities, who you may think are a bunch of clowns, and you may not have much respect for them, but it is absolutely their job to handle things. Everything should be handled at the lowest level possible. That's how you prevent the aggregation of centralized power that turns us into an autocracy, an oligarchy, ultimately a dictatorship. That's critical. Separation of powers, the federalized, the federal system, which means that you've got state governments are not local offices, branch offices of the federal government. They're completely sovereign, different governments from the federal government. The federal government has its duties, its responsibilities, and its authorities. They overlap a little bit, but the fact is that the federal government has no business telling your state government how to do its business in general. And the state government does not work for the federal government. So it's really critical that we understand these things if we are to, first of all, provide the physical security that we need to for our land, for our homes, for our nation, for our homes, for our people, for our communities, and then also the protection that we need to ensure that we don't, the constitutional, the philosophical, the legal protection to ensure that we don't lose our liberties in the process. Again, people in government are just as corrupt as you and I are. And they will seize an opportunity, just like you or I would, to be more powerful. Like Lord Acton said, power tends to corrupt. Absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. Absolute power is simply power that is not supervised. We have to supervise our employees to prevent them from stealing our children's futures. Because what they'll do, what humans do when they're in that position is they'll win that big war, they'll close the border, and they'll get rid of all the bad guys, and then they'll say, okay, we're in charge here now. You work for us. And it's not true. They work for us. We don't work for them. All right. It is absolutely critical that you as a citizen remain involved at all times with your eyes wide open. And you've got to understand, you have to understand that there are more enemies here than you can count. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to give you information drawn from actual intel reports, an actual understanding of how government is supposed to work, and an actual understanding of what the government actually does. And I'm offering that to you The reason I'm doing that is not because, again, not because I want to scare you, not because I have something I want to gain from it. I've already, had my election this year and lost it. What I'm saying is that my kids can't be free unless your kids are free. Let's make sure your kids are free, please. Stand up and do your part. All right. So I hope that I've been able to put this together, because these are some pretty disparate ideas that seem to be coming from left field. And then you see the attack in New Orleans, you see the attack in Las Vegas, and of course everybody says, "Oh, well, that's horrible. I can't believe that happened. That's a really bad guy." And then I say, well, it's all part of the bigger plan. And your response might be, very, very rightly, your response might be, Wilson, I understand you think it's all part of the bigger plan, but we don't have any proof that, that bin Laden's son contacted this guy and said, drive your truck up Canal Street in New Orleans and run over a bunch of people. No, we don't. We don't. But what you have to understand is, once you get to that decentralized command, what you really have is people who are providing opportunities, resources, and vision, and then letting other people just do their jobs. So I learned this going from regular forces in the Army, like the big Army, where, there's a colonel who tells a lieutenant colonel what to do, tells the captain what to do, tells the lieutenant what to do, tells the sergeant what to do, goes. But instead, in special operations, which I was honored to fight with the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force in Iraq, I was profoundly honored to have the opportunity to work with them. But I was not one of them. I was, peripheral. My unit was a peripheral organization. It was pulled in for a special mission, and we provided security for them on their FOBs, also sometimes on their sites as they went out and executed missions. We take the outer perimeter, that sort of thing. We were very proficient at what we did, and it was an honor to be chosen for that mission. But the point is that I saw, going into special ops, into that operational realm, and seeing the way they do things, that very rarely was it a matter of someone walking up and saying, "You pick that box up, put it over there, go stand on it, look that way." It was, "I need you to cover this sector. Let me know if you need anything." Or, "I need this guy picked up at this place." And it was up to the team to figure out how to do it. And they were good at it. So what I'm getting at here is that these operational cells that are now within the United States they don't need these solid lines of communication and resources and logistics, everything going all the way back to Afghanistan or to Khartoum, or, they don't need all that. What they have is people forward who know what they're doing and will make the right decisions based on the ideology they serve. So what we need is Americans who are prepared to serve the ideology of America. Well, these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. We need people who know and understand that, who live for that, and who will actually conduct operations without a centralized command and control system to coordinate, to provide resources, but actually develop their own vision for how to do this and get the job done. That's what we need. But in order for that to be successful, your federal government needs to close the border. It needs to hunt out the most dangerous of all, and it needs to remove them from the battlefield. And unfortunately, I believe that the continental United States is the battlefield, and we have to be prepared as citizens to do our part. Now, does that mean you go around shooting people who look different from you or who eat different food? No. It means that when you see someone doing something to hurt other Americans, you need to be prepared to defend them. You need to be prepared to protect them. this is freedom. This is the responsibility required for freedom. And we've got one other book here that hopefully you can get a hold of. This is also on Amazon, so you can get Al Qaeda 2.0. Al Qaeda 2.0. This book here give you some idea of what will be required of you. And I'm not talking about in 5 years. I'm talking about in the coming months. So until the changing of the guard is complete, Mr. Trump has his entire administration in place doing their job, and that the lines of communication and coordination and resources and the organizations that do these jobs are in place and are actually functioning like a well-oiled machine. You need to be more aware, more prepared, more capable than you are accustomed to be. We all do. All right, so if you're interested in getting a hold of us, that's me and Todd. Todd and me, Todd and I, us, Todd and Marshall. You can look us up on X, and our handle is at Taproot_actual. At Taproot_actual. Get a hold of us, holler at us, tell us what you think about the show. Argue with me, tell me I'm wrong. Please tell me I'm wrong. I don't want to be right about most of the things I've said tonight. But as you can see right up here, I have a bunch of kids. I've got 9 of them, and I will do whatever it takes to ensure that my children can raise their children in a free country. And ladies and gentlemen, I actually know what that means. So let's do this. Let's be Americans. Let's stand up for what's right and true and just. Let's defend our homes. Let's be wise. And let's have our heads on a swivel. I really appreciate y'all. Thanks for putting up with me. Thanks to the GCD network. And if you would, please keep our friend Paul in your prayers. He's in a rough place, and he needs God's help. Thank you all very much. Take care. Bye.